a video going here. It's low tech, but it should. Yeah, there we go. So, bottom-up revolution. How many of you know what bottom-up is? That's the usual case. And so I'm going to be talking about it, and let's see, which is the direction? Forget. Here's the outline. I'm going to talk about what it is. It's a tsunami that has affected every business, and I'll cover it over the course of this talk. I'm going to give you a brief overview, then I'm going to talk about bottom-up networking, about the buyer's and the hero's journey. How many of you know what the buyer's journey is? How many of you know what the hero's journey is? Even less. Okay, great. And then I'm going to talk about the anatomy of positive experience and how that applies to your life, business, and customers. So let's get started. So in northern Canada, the people there live in snow, and they need 50 words to describe snow in order for them to survive and thrive. And I believe that you need to really have a bigger picture of what bottom up and top down, the opposite of bottom up, are, so that you can survive and thrive in today's world, because there's a bottom up explosion underway. And you encounter bottom up stuff every day. Now, there's a story of the blind wise men. That's the picture on the left. They were put in a room and they were told to figure out what it was, and one person felt a hose, another felt a rope, another felt a carpet, another felt a tree trunk, and they were all touching an elephant. And if you look at social media and wisdom of the crowd and crowdfunding and crowdsourcing and the buyer's journey and product reviews on Amazon and Yelp and networking and grassroots and open source, these are all different aspects of bottom up. And I got started on it because I have a website, and I started it as a hobby, as a personal thing, and it started to take off. And once I started taking a bottom up approach to it, meaning giving power to my users, power to the writers, to the volunteer editors that I recruited, and to the readers in terms of coming up with policy decision, the more successful it was. And it went from a couple thousand views a month, not views, but visitors, up to 100, 200, even 800,000 visitors a month. And it went, and I ended up shifting from running conferences to running the website as my source of income. So what is bottom up? Since most of you don't know. So bottom up is a way of seeing and being and relating. We evolved as humans to be bottom up. Before civilization, people lived primarily in hunter-gatherer bands of 30 to 80 people for most of human existence. And if you go back to our early predecessors, that goes back over 5 million years. And what does that mean? What did they do that was bottom up? They had to take care of each other. They depended upon each other to survive, and they depended upon nature to survive. So they had to make decisions thinking about how their actions would affect others. They had to care about everybody else. A kid didn't cry because there was a whole band of people there to take care of them, the baby. And we evolved over the course of those millions of years, literally hundreds of different genes that make us bottom-up people. Now, most of the bottom-up stuff that I'm talking about in terms of humans is the kind of stuff that's described when you look at emotional intelligence, compassion, empathy, thinking about other people, caring about other people. Those are all things that are built into our nervous systems. They're built into our endocrine systems. And what happened, though, was civilization came along. Civilization involved the domestication of plants and animals. And we started changing, so we started living with thousands of people all at once. And that repressed a lot of our bottom-up nature. And it led to centralization and hierarchy and domination and slavery. A lot of good stuff came with civilization, but we lost part of that early part of who we were. And so what's happened, though, that's interesting is smartphones, the internet, and online multiplayer video games I mean, just one game may have 15 million players, like Ward, I don't even remember the name of it, but there are some that have 15 million players alone. And what it's done is it's changed the way people's brains work. People born after 1980 have different brains. And I've been giving talks about this and having conversation about this. Everybody agrees. Their brains are different. And it's changed the way we look at how things are done. Like, my son was at Bucks years ago, and he had an assignment to work with 4 other people. One of them was slacking, and I said, well, you should go to the teacher and say, well, he shouldn't be involved or something. And he goes, that's not the way it's done, Dad. It's everybody together. And that's the way people think now. It's changed. The idea of bottom-up is something that it didn't just pop up. In the world of history, it used to be that people would think of history as the kings and generals and corporate titans, and that's changed. Now there's bottom-up history that looks at different cultural groups. Howard Zinn wrote the book, The People's History of the United States, and that looked at how soldiers and farmers and workers were. And now if you go to a history department in a university, it's mostly bottom-up history. It's not top-down history. When you think about bottom-up, I'd like you to think about it as cooperation, interdependence, paying attention to the whole environment. Among Native Americans, they have a saying, make a decision thinking about the next 7 generations. And that's a part of bottom-up, is thinking how it affects all the stakeholders. It was great that Paul talked about teamwork and thinking of the team. And when you think about a team and the stakeholders, it's your first thought is going to be employees and customers, but it's also your suppliers, it's the community that you're in, it's the nature that you depend upon, it's the whole culture. And it's really important. I talked to a consultant who works on that, and he described how when one of the top national soccer teams invites a player to be considered to be a part of the team, the family's involved, because they want to see how it affects the family. That's a part of the team too, the family. So it's a big picture. And let's see. Science is also part of bottom-up. Science used to be atomistic. It used to be looking at counting things, looking at the parts, and taking things apart. And that didn't work for subatomic particle physics, and it didn't work for complex ecosystems. So they had to come up with a new kind of science, and it's called systems theory or chaos theory. And the new model looks at patterns and relationships and cycles. And there's some really exciting ideas behind that, because with systems theory, you can describe changes that can happen really fast. The cycle can loop and get bigger and bigger, and change can happen overnight. So a lot of exciting ideas there that all tie into this. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about with this was, another thing is, it's connection. We have transitioned from an information economy to a connection economy. And you see that with social media. I had the light bulb go off in my head when Facebook passed Google. Facebook is all about connection. And really, Google is too. The main algorithm that Google got started with was based on how many other sites linked into a site so it would be at the top. And so that's a bottom-up idea, that it's looking at how connections affect things. So one of the first ways, you're here to network, so I wanted to talk about bottom-up versus top-down networking. Now, top-down is the opposite of bottom-up. Top-down tends to be hierarchical and centralized. And so when it comes to networking, you're thinking about what's in it for me and how do I get business from the network. And that's reasonable, but if you want to look at it from a bigger bottom-up perspective, you want to think of the network as a connected system, and you're part of a whole group of people. And the difference is you give to the network. You don't necessarily give to a person and get something back. You think about all the stakeholders who are involved in the network, And what happens is you put into the system, and then the system will eventually give you something back. I help anyone. It's like glue for connections and strengthening the network. And that's a different way of thinking about it. Eventually, the way it should work is that, let's say, you help somebody, they take your help another person, that person helps another person, and then that third person will say, oh, this guy I need to contact, this person I need to contact. All right, so next I want to talk about the buyers or consumers or customers journey. And basically, selling has shifted so that there's a bottom-up way of thinking about it. Now, the top-down way of thinking about, and these are different maps of how the buyer's journey works. The top-down is the seller's in charge model. Anybody who wants can email me, and I'll be happy to send you the slide deck for this too, if you don't, so you don't have to take the pictures. I'm happy to do that. It's happier@gmail, HAPPIER@gmail. So the top-down model is the seller's in charge, and some people find that offensive. I mean, if you go to a website like that, what you'll see is, give us your email address and place your order here. That's it. But the idea of the buyers or consumers or customers' journey is based on the way people buy now. People look around and they do research. I mean, how many of you go to a store and then check online, like Amazon or something like that, before you make a purchase of something significant? And for people under 40, it's like 80-85%. That's the way things are done. People research the web and before they buy something, especially big ticket items. So the idea of the buyer's journey is, the first step is somebody realizes they need something, or they need to get rid of something, or they want something, and they start to look into it. So the awareness is the first step, and then there's consideration, evaluation, research, and solutions. And I think that's where marketing people can really get into something very different. With that, you're going to become a relationship with that person. You're not going to sell them anything right away. You're going to give them something. You're going to give them information, and you're going to develop trust with them. This is the new, it's called inbound marketing. People find you. It's not cold calls. It's you putting stuff up so that people can find you. That means a lot of free content. Now, what you do is you give the content away, and at least at one point in the beginning, you ask for an email back from them in exchange for the content. It could be an article, it could be a list, and that way you can get started with developing a relationship with them. And so you want to think about, I mean, how many of you do that right now? Have something on your website that they have to give an email for in order to get it back? 2, 3, 4. Oh, more hands are coming up. Maybe a quarter of the people here. This is the way it's working now. You don't just say, give me your email. You say, let's do a transaction. And what you're doing then is you're getting them to say yes right away, early on in the relationship, and you've started something. What then usually happens is you use a series of autoresponders to program emails to teach them more about whatever it is they're looking at buying. And if it's a high-ticket item, you could have as many as 10, even 20 different emails. And with some websites and software programs, mostly websites, like HubSpot is widely used. Now, I think there's one company here at least that does that locally. Are you here? Yeah, great, yeah. So if you want that, it's something you can get help with. But that's a way to build a relationship and keep making connections happen so that when the person is ready to buy, they're going to think of you as somebody that's really been helpful and trustworthy. Now, when you think about the buyer's journey, some describe it as 3, 4, 5, or 6 stages. And the simple one is awareness, consideration, and purchase. But then for some businesses, you want to keep things going. So you want to have retention. You may want to have service contracts. You may want to do consulting. You may want to get them to rebuy things on a regular basis. And the last one is advocacy, loyalty, and evangelization. You want to get endorsements. You want to get referrals and things like that. So these are all ways, and these are bottom-up things. Getting people to endorse you is a bottom-up idea. Getting people to refer is a bottom-up concept. So, the hero's journey. I love the hero's journey. The hero's journey was described in a book that ranked one of the top 100 most influential books of the 20th century. It's called The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. And the idea of the hero's journey is described in just about every movie you're going to watch. It's how a character goes through the changes to become a new person. And really, the hero's journey is about, and you don't, I put a long list there of stuff that you don't need to really look at the details of it. It can be a pain to try to read all of those things. But the hero's journey starts where somebody's in their ordinary world and then gets a call. And I like to use the Star Wars story because most people have seen it. And George Lucas consulted with the guy who wrote the book about the hero's journey in designing Star Wars. And so Luke Skywalker starts off and he's with his aunt and uncle, and Obi-Wan Kenobi says to him, "Come, I'll teach you how to become a Jedi Knight and we'll go rescue Princess Leia." And like most people do, or many people do, when they get this call, Luke said, "Nah, I can't. I got to help my aunt and uncle." And most people will do that. And if you think of a customer, they may do that too. "I'm not ready to buy." But then something happens and they get a stronger call. And for Luke Skywalker, his aunt and uncle were killed by Darth Vader. So then he went and he accepted the call. And there are all kinds of different calls in life: money and love and relationships and pain and offers of new jobs or being fired or illness. I mean, I've given talks to doctors on how getting help for like headaches is a heroic journey. Accepting the call to actually get the help and not just live with what you've got. In order to accept the call, you have to cross a threshold. You have to make a commitment. You have to either do something new or stop something that you've been doing. And usually there are mentors to help you to do that. And once you know about the hero's journey, you're going to notice it when you're looking at movies and novels. So there are all these different kinds of mentors that can work for you in a hero's journey. Some of them are books or websites or webinars, or salespeople can do it. You know, in movies, it can be some odd person, or it could be what they call shapeshifters. But you can play that role as in business, helping somebody to make a decision to move to that next step. Now, as part of the hero's journey, once you cross the threshold, you start on your journey, and it means you're going through changes, and you're becoming a new person. And to do that, you have to connect with new people. You have to develop new resources, new allies, new skills. You have to develop new tools or weapons. And part of the hero's journey is you need to reassess who you are. You need to look at your masculinity and your femininity, whether you're a man or a woman, and you have to revisit your connection with your higher power. And this is all part of redefining who you are. And this is something that everybody goes through when they're going through changes in their lives. This is where you can play a role with your customers too. You can help them to think about how acquiring your services or your product is going to change their lives, how it's going to affect their relationship with their family, how it changes their attitude to their lives. And this is where you can really go to a different level in looking at your products and what you have to offer. So I've got a list here of ways to think about the consideration part, which I think is the part where you have the most influence, because this is where you're going to get the person to decide that you're the person they want to do business with. And the first one is Save the Cat. Now, there's a book for screenwriters about making movies, and they say, and the title of it is Save the Cat. And the idea is, in a movie, you want to have a character that people like, so they'll be interested in the movie and they'll care about the main character. So, in the early part of the movie, the main character needs to save the cat. And you want to become that person. You want to be the good guy. You want to be the person that they like. So that's an important part of this early on. Then there's a long list of things that you can do, and they include research competitors' approaches, create a sticky website with useful content, create a series of emails. You get emails using lead magnets, those are those free articles or lists, and consider using a tool like HubSpot or your local source for it. Teach your potential customer how to be a better, smarter buyer. Learn what your potential buyers are learning from places and people other than your website. Build your reputation or social proof with endorsements you publish on your website. That's a really important one. You know, if you go to Yelp, let's say, how many of you use Yelp? If you go there, you're going to look at the reviews. You're going to look at how many there are, and then you're going to maybe look at what people say about the place. You need to have the same kind of a thing, and that means you have to ask for it. And so I have one project that is nonprofit. In the beginning, I asked once every 3 months for a donation. Now I have different interaction points on the website where it asks for donations so that people using it will encounter them every day, just about, unless they've donated. Create and join groups on Facebook. Use YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. I learned about Facebook from a colleague who is a member of over 1,000 Facebook groups. And gradually, I'm up to about 500 now. And basically, I share content. And I focus, most of the ones I'm a member of have over 5,000 members. Some have over 100,000 members. It's really, I mean, I have some that are local for Bucks County that have just a couple hundred. And I've started a few. But they can be very powerful, and it's free. Talk to your customers. I mean, when they buy, do an in-depth interview. Push yourself, go beyond your usual envelope, and really ask them what were the considerations that they made in how they decided to buy from you. What did you do? What did your competitors do that made them think maybe they should buy from them? The more you ask, the more powerful you're going to be able to come up with an effective marketing program. So, these are the kinds of content that you can put up. Look on the screen. You might want to look on the screen now. Book, ebook, website, landing pages, blog, podcast, YouTube channel, Facebook group, social media, SEO, webinars. And you can use Fiverr or Upwork. They're outsourcing tools that are very inexpensive. Like for my book, my publisher made a cover that didn't have any women on it. It had 7 different characters, but no women. And I said, you can't do that. And they said, well, it's done. They were using clip art. And I said, well, can you change it? They go, no. Well, can I change it? And so I went to Fiverr and I hired 3 different artists. And it's very inexpensive. So I spent less than $100 on 3 different artists, and they bid on it. At least 30 people bid. And I got 3 different examples of the book with women included on the cover. And now the book has women, and it can be very inexpensive to do that. Okay. So bottom-up strategies to think about the buyer's journey. Create Google alerts for your product categories, for your competition, for big customers or target customers. How many of you use Google alerts? Google alerts are so valuable, and if you're not using them, check them out. If you do a search for something, you can set up a daily or a weekly or a more frequent alerts so that you can get the information on. I have about 30 or 40 of them. You want one for your company name, you want one for your name, for your competitors, things like that. A similar thing is to track hashtags on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. That'll give you similar information. You don't have to have any followers on Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram or connections in order to use this. This is a bottom-up way of thinking about those social media sites, finding references to stuff that is relevant to you. And then again, research how your competitors deal with the buyer's journey, ask customers, and then build an effective platform. An effective platform, I've got the book, Bottom-Up Revolution, and in there's a detailed description of what goes into an effective platform. There are whole books on how to create a platform, but a platform should offer information about you. It should have articles. It should describe your services. It should absolutely have endorsements. If you've got any media coverage, earned media, it should have that in there. These are all really essential things that you need to have. And here's an example of a site that needs help. This is a guy who's a storyteller. And basically, it's missing endorsements, it's missing interviews or articles about him. He doesn't have any articles on there. He doesn't have any sample videos, even though he's a storyteller. That's kind of crazy. There's no social media links in there. And there's no newsletter option, no way to get signed up for anything. This, he's going to think, the internet doesn't work. And he's right, it won't work for him because it's missing everything. Now here's a decent one. It's a well-designed site, and it's got the basic content on it. It's got a lot of information and content that's free. It's got education and FAQs and stories and articles and a blog. It's got earned media, and it's got endorsements with faces. And you want to have all these things on your website. And you want to have most of this above the fold. I looked at another website. I couldn't help. It was a restaurant that had the name Bottomup in it. And it ended up that all the importance, I wanted to find out where it was. I had to scroll down around 8 pages to get an address. They had endorsements, they had media, but they were 10 pages down on scrolling. And guess what? When I went to check them out on Yelp, they were out of business. So now I want to talk about positive experiences. I've been involved in positive psychology since I'd say early 80s. I invented a kind of a high-tech biofeedback ring, like a high-tech mood ring, and it was based on temperature biofeedback, and I made a tape to go with it, cassette tape back then. And I included an instruction, think of a heartwarming experience, and connect that with a warm feeling in your heart, and smile. And when people were able to do that, all their physiology went in the right direction. And their muscles relaxed, their heart rate calmed down, their breathing calmed down. So I was really fascinated with what this was. And I started asking people for examples of heartwarming experiences. And some of them, I thought, well, it's not a heartwarming experience, but it's a positive experience. So I started working with that, and eventually was giving talks at it at national conferences for psychologists and what have you. And what I came up with is the idea that positive experiences are the basic building blocks of your ability to be happy, to face challenges, to be in loving relationships, to face adversity, to cope with stress. Anybody disagree? Nobody has ever disagreed, even on one-on-one conversations. And that's thousands of people already. And as long as you're going to agree to that, I think you got to agree that they're the most valuable things we have. We work hard so we can have positive experiences, whether they're vacations, or taking care of our family, or getting out of trouble. There are all kinds. And I put together a list that's I call it the Call Positive Experience Inventory, and you can get it and download it at robcall.com/KPEI for your email. And basically, the question then is, if they're the most valuable things we have, what do you do? What you do is you learn to have skills for having more, better, stronger, deeper, positive experiences. Now, how does that apply to you here? Well, first of all, it applies to you personally, but it also applies to your business. How can you think about your clients and your employees in terms of positive experiences? Now, I talk about this as bottom-up because most positive experiences are about connecting with other people or connecting with nature. You don't have many positive experiences that don't involve one or the other. Even if it's just cleaning a drawer, it's something around you. And so I've broken it down into a series of steps. And I've presented this at the Positive Psychology Summit meeting for the United States and for the Positive Psychology meeting for Canadians. Both of these were peer-reviewed conferences and presentations. And I break it down into 6 steps. Be prepared for the positive experience, mentally and physically. Plan, schedule, research, anticipate positive experiences. Recognize, identify, initiate, and embrace positive experience opportunities. Intensify and prolong them, and encode to memory, and integrate and use the positive experience later. How much time do I have, by the way?
About 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Oh, great. Okay. So, the first step is be prepared mentally and physically. Now, to do that, you want to be in good shape. If you see a friend you haven't seen in 20 years, drive by and stop at a light 100 feet from you. If you can jog up to that, you can be able to knock on the window and see the person. If not, you miss it. And there are all kinds of levels of that where your energy has an effect on how much you can embrace an opportunity for a positive experience. You also want to have good smiles. So I want to do a little exercise with you now, okay? So what I've done with patients when I was a counselor working with biofeedback is I would hook people up with electromyographs. It measures the electrical activity of muscles, and I would hook up the smile muscles. And I would ask them to smile as hard as they could, so you can smile really hard. I'd like you to close your eyes and try to do that now. Strain to smile. Really hard, harder, that's it, really strain to do it. Good. Now, I'd like you to stand up and face somebody. And now I want you to smile to them. You don't have to strain. And now try to add a little extra to the smile. Put a little crinkle in your eyes. Now, little kids smile off the face. Little kids smile with their butts. Wiggle your butt. And my 5-year-old granddaughter, she goes like this with her arms. And actually I have a friend I play racquetball, and when he hits a killer shot, he goes, kazing. Those are all ways to smile and to express positive emotion. I didn't tell any of you to laugh. That was a bonus. Okay, you can sit down now.
Yeah, that's good.
The thing is, in Japan, where they mask emotional expression, they found that 5% of the cadavers, the smile muscles were atrophied. And people don't smile enough. They can smile more. And there are all these different smile muscles that you can smile with that people don't use. So the more you can add smiling to your ability to respond, the better. So that's the first step. Get those smiles ready. I've worked with cancer patients, and I've sent them home with pumping smile iron exercises where they'll sit in front of a mirror and smile. That's a challenge. People are really hard on themselves, so smiling at yourself in front of a mirror actually turns out to be very hard. Next, study and schedule and plan your reactions. So most people plan for vacations or weekends. Put positive experiences into your day, every day, different parts of your day. Now think about this for your customers too. How can you put positive experiences into your relationships with your customers? How can you sell your product or your service in terms of positive experiences? The more you can think about that, the more you can offer positive experiences, the better. Now, I've done consulting with politicians, coaching them on how to put their life stories into their stump speeches. And my theory is, if you can touch people's hearts, it's much more powerful than just giving them statistics or numbers or facts. People are much more likely to connect if you can do that. So you want to get to that, and you want to do that with your business. Now this applies to every one of you individually, but it also applies to your business. Also, learn and research your environment. Learn about the nature, learn about the animals, learn about what happens in different seasons, learn about the history of where you are. You got a company, and you're selling real estate, put out a sheet that talks about some of the early history, put out about the nature, about the animals, about the trees, about the seasons. These are ways that you can provide information that can help people to be happier and to have more positive experiences. And it doesn't take much, really, to do that. Anticipation is a great source of pleasure. Now, you can do something on the spur of the moment, but if you can plan it 6 months ahead, or if you can give it to a client and give them reasons to anticipate what they're going to get when they get what you offer, anticipation is a good chunk of what makes it a positive experience. And that happens before it actually happens. So use that in terms of thinking about what you offer to people. And use it in your own life too. Try to plan way ahead. Then the next step is recognize the opportunity. Well, one more thing in planning is that, 1 minute, oh, okay. I'm going to just throw this at you. Okay. Plan for the unexpected. My big one is every year I see a goose with goslings, or I'll see a tree coated with shimmering with ice. I give myself permission to break out of my schedule, pull my car over, and just enjoy it. It might just be 30 seconds or a minute, but give yourself that permission that this is one of those moments where I'm going to give myself permission to take that time to have a positive experience. Now, the thing with positive experiences, they work because you integrate them into your life. The thing is, it's not that easy to remember them. So write them down. Keep a positive experience diary and save that. And then use those and clone them and put them into your life. Now, I knew I wasn't going to have time to tell you that much about this. It's in the book. But you can clone your positive experiences. You know, one of the scariest things for people to do is talk in front of a group. And one of the things you can do is you can think about a time where you felt really comfortable, maybe holding your grandchild or your kid. You know, one of the heartwarming experiences that a lot of people talk is about watching your kids sleep, for example. So you can use that in other situations too. All right, I guess I'm out of time.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
thanks so much. All right.